warm welcome to everybody out there who is attending this. This session is a little bit different from what I usually do. Usually in the past, I've done something a little bit more technical, shall we say, on EA. But this time, I thought I would like to share an experience from an organization known as the Government of Jersey. More about that in a moment, on how they get started with Enterprise Architect and how they were assisted. First of all, I'd like to make a statement so that we're all clear. The Government of Jersey have given me permission to share some of this information. We won't do a deep dive on anything, or any data will not be exposed, but they have given me the go-ahead and their blessing, so I'm very grateful for that. Also, although I am the presenter, I must acknowledge that this engagement with the Government of Jersey was a team effort. Myself and my colleague Sam, who I must acknowledge, he did a valuable contribution to the work you will see presented. So let's go. So first of all, a little bit of the agenda. What I'll do is, first of all, a brief introduction, then have a look at what the Government of Jersey first requested, because there are two phases to this engagement. The approach that was used, a meta model or MDG, which I'll also give you a demonstration of in Enterprise Architect, followed by a second inquiry, which will result in a model-based add-in, which I'll then demonstrate, have a look at some issues, and where do we go from here. So, me. Well, I was a principal consultant at Dunstan Thomas until July 2024, when I left them after 17, 18 years working with EA. And I was very lucky to be engaged by Spark Systems Central Europe just a few days ago, actually. But I am now part of Spark System Central Europe as a consultant, again with Enterprise Architect. My specialisms, UML, SysML, BPMN, ArchiMate, MDG development, which I really enjoy, scripting, DocGen, which is involving scripting usually, and full-blown add-ins in C#. Now, Jersey. Now, in case any one of you, particularly the members from overseas who are joining this session, may not have heard of Jersey. Well, Jersey is a little island off the coast of France. In fact, it's nearer France than it is England. But it's part of the United Kingdom, and it's a self-governing dependency, which basically means it has its own government, its own rules, its own taxes, and so on. Very interesting little place to visit, but I just thought I'd drop that in case you'd never heard of Jersey before, or you're getting confused with New Jersey in America or something. But no, it's a sort of special part of the UK. So that's Jersey. I will refer to the Government of Jersey as GoJ. It's just easier than saying the full thing out in full every time. So what do they want? Well, Government of Jersey had already had EA, right? So like a lot of us, we get EA all excited, we load it up and we say, now where do I go from here? There's hundreds of menu options, dozens of ribbons. You open a diagram and it gives you a choice of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So although they did battle away and try to get something created for their enterprise architecture, they eventually contacted us at Dunstan Thomas and said, help, we need your assistance. We really need to know how to configure this because we believe it is not set up correctly. How do we use it the way we want to use it? not the way EA is trying to tell us how to do things. We want something that's easy to use, a notation that makes sense to us, particularly our enterprise architecture, not just anybody's enterprise architecture. Got to be consistent, got to be repeatable. Although not initially required, later on down the road will be business process modeling, and they're more than happy with BPMN 2.0. Any notation ideally should be understandable to stakeholders in addition to those who created the model in the first place. And being a government, they have standards. So there were certain standards which the model would have to conform to. Repository structure, that's always a minefield because EA just says, yeah, create what you like. I don't care. You can have as many packages, many diagrams, put them on where you like. It doesn't make any difference. But of course, as experts in enterprise architect, we know that is not a good thing to do. So is there a best practice? Can we future-proof this repository so that we're not continually searching for things all over the place? And there will be a glossary of terms, that is, things that definitions of things, so people can conform to those definitions. So that is what we received from the government of Jersey. So this is the approach that we used, which is a pretty standard approach, I guess. Yes, of course, it's written in Enterprise Architect. So the Dunstan Thomas basically delivered on site a one-day practicalities course. Now, this course essentially is a complete hands-on session. And what it does is it says, this is how you set up EA. This is how you use a perspective. This is how you change your visual style, and so on and so on. As well as all the core skills. How do you create a diagram? How do you reuse elements? How do you use the quick linker, etc., etc. So that was all done. Then, most importantly, an interactive whiteboard approach. How do we get the meta model? Okay, they were using ArchiMate, and they had been experimenting with ArchiMate. Nothing wrong with that. But government of Jersey sort of said, well, it's a bit too big. Wouldn't it be nice if this, or wouldn't it be nice if that? And all of those questions were developed interactively with them over in Jersey. So then we came back, developed a meta model, which was then presented along with the glossary. And that's just basically part of EA, right? That was then sent over to the government of Jersey, who installed it because there was a user guide on how to install the meta model and so on. They used it, feedback, and then that went round a few iterations, so everything settled down. And that was the meta model development itself. So one or two interesting things happened along the way with the meta model. So let's have a look at that. This is the meta model that was developed. Now, I will stress this is not the final meta model as delivered to Government of Jersey, or GoJ. This is the one that we brainstormed based entirely on ArchiMate. Now, one of the things that ArchiMate does not have is bespoke data tag value. So you'll see on the notes here some tag values to say, well, it's not just a driver, it is something else. It's not just a capability, it's something else. The naming convention, verb noun, I'll address a little bit later. And again, those of you who know ArchiMate will say, well, hang on a minute. Where is the business layer? Where's the application layer? Where's the infrastructure? Well, they weren't too concerned about that. What they really wanted to capture initially was, what can we do? Why do we do it? And can we produce a time frame of stages of development? Hence, we have the capabilities and the plateaus and deliverables down here. So that is what we took away from Jersey. The other thing they were commenting on is these arrows are not exactly self-explanatory. So this came up with a meta model feature list. GoJ only wanted selected elements and relationships from ArchiMate. Now, those of you who have developed meta models will know there are two strategies for developing a meta model. A, you can just use meta classes from UML, or you can generalize the ArchiMate itself. I'll tell you the approach we used a little bit later. The subset of relationships and then the appearances, shape script for each stereotype, which is tag value driven to change various bits. And to make everything consistent, it was imperative that the rectangle notation was disabled. They only wanted one notation, not ArchiMate's choice of two. Full quick linker, a pattern, so they can get a quick start, and a wizard for the repository structure. So let's have a look. So hopefully you can all see my Enterprise Architect screen. This is Enterprise Architect version 16.2. And over here, we have the model itself. Now, there's nothing spectacular about this particular meta model, but if we have a look, it has a particular profile, as you would expect. And if I sort of zoom in on one of these things, you'll see that it has an icon, it has an image, and it's directly related from class. It does not extend ArchiMate. The reason is, A, we needed control over the shape script, and we needed to do from first principles, which raises a big issue, which I'm going to show you how we solved it in a moment. So we're not going to go deep dive on the meta model or how it's constructed or all the inner workings, but basically that is the meta model for the stereotypes. There is the relationships. So this is basically all your quick linkers, etc. And that just goes through as per normal. There are diagrams, there are toolboxes, of course, and there are patterns. So there's a pattern here, which it basically is, if I open up the diagram, that's the capability pattern. And as you can see, here is the effect of the look and feel of some of the tag values. We'll demonstrate that in a little while. There's enumerations and a wizard. Now, the wizard allows them to create a very simple structure very, very quickly, or a very complex structure very, very quickly. So if we go into the wizard, there is a wizard document here, which is basically a linked document, which gives a visualization of the wizard itself. We then have the project structure, which is just a project structure based upon packages, elements, reusable items, etc., and namespaces for rapid access. So that is the meta model. Let's switch to show it in action. So here I've got a model root node. I've got the Government of Jersey meta model imported. So just double check that that's imported. And you can see there, right? So imported. So we now set a perspective to the GoJ. So what we're going to do is create from pattern, and you'll see here the GoJ capability gap. So this is getting them started. Make it easy for everyone. So they're not battling EA. EA is doing all the work. Why not? So there's the structure of the repository. Don't need to go through this in great depth, but this gives the modeler an idea of why. Now, this is customizable. So if they do not wish to have all those packages, then when the model is created, it will be customized. So that could be checked. Then you simply create the model and it will say, well, do you want everything or would you like to cherry pick? Right, so very quickly, we get the repository structure. So let's just take any package and add a diagram to it. Here we are, the diagram. And there's the capability diagram. Open up the toolbox. And initially, there's just one diagram. So if I take, for example, a capability onto there, you'll see that there's a little pop-up saying, which type would you like? Well, let's say it's decommissioned. And immediately it changes to that particular color. I can repeat that process and I can say future. I won't go through the whole thing because you're probably very familiar with how to use this particular feature or how to use meta models and toolboxes. And of course, quick link. Now the quick link was agreed, the wording was agreed with the GoJ to make it meaningful to them, not necessarily the jargon or ArchiMate speak that you would get if you extended ArchiMate directly. So just a composition. And as a request, the GoJ said, well, not everybody will know what a black diamond means. So let's keep the stereotype labels as a visual clue. So again, everything was designed to help them make it easier, and so they're not puzzled about what was going on. So the last thing I'll show on this before we sort of open up an issue is let's just create another package in here just for sake of argument here, just a package. And let's now create a diagram like that. And let's do a pattern. So this is the pattern that was created. You saw it in the PowerPoint slides. And all I need to do is just go ka-ching. And very quickly, they get a pattern. Productivity, consistency, and productivity. There we go. And that could be modified according to their wishes. And of course, we could have more than one pattern. You're not limited to a pattern at all. So the question. So let's go back very briefly to the meta model. And if we have a look at the meta model here, the question is, I've got a shape script, which needs to be based pretty much 98% on ArchiMate. So the question which was in our minds was, how do we create the shape script? Now, we could simply have a look at ArchiMate and work it out. Yes, but don't want to do that. So this is what we did. This is a real cool trick. So this is probably the only sort of techie bit in this section of the presentation. So let's basically open up a blank MDG. So here's a blank MDG, right? Nothing in it. Here, I've got a capability. So this is the stereotype under development. And as you can see, it's got a feature, an attribute. Sorry, let's use the window. I'm trying to use the window. Attributes, there we go. And it has an image attribute where the shape script will go. But presently, there's nothing in it. So this is what we do. We open up File Explorer. We then go into the installation folder of Enterprise Architect, which in EA16 form is in Windows programs. So looking for Spark Systems, there we are. Looking for EA, looking for MDGs, and we see ArchiMate, which is an XML file. Yeah. We right click and we open it in a browser, not an editor, but a browser. Right? So there we see the entire meta model in XML. So if we search for capability, here is capability. And if we look carefully, there is an image tag there. I'll just get the mouse in the right place. Come on. There. All the way across to there. Now, as you can see, it's totally nonsensical, right? Because it's been binary form. Now, there are many ways you can decompile the binary. Yes. And I do know there is a website of ShapeScript resources out there. Yes. But in case you didn't know that, or in case you didn't know how to reverse engineer this, watch this. Having got the image section selected, we then right click and copy it. Back to EA, back to the image attribute, right click inside this area here and paste. All right. Now, edit with profile helper, shape script, ka-ching. Now that is cool. So you don't need any fancy decompiler software or anything like that, and that will work on any published MDG in XML. So now we've got the raw shape script, we can then begin to analyze this to see how the decorations were done and what's missing and change it to our purposes. So yeah, I'd like to share that with you. So that is, yeah, I think that's pretty cool trick. And that's how all the shape scripts were done for all the elements in the meta model. And you know, if GoJ decided they wanted applications, could do exactly the same thing. So no need to worry about working out the shape scripts yourself. You can just open up the XML in a browser, copy, and then paste. So one question may be in your mind, why do we open it in the browser? Simple. If you open it up in editors, they have a nasty habit of putting line breaks in. And when you copy paste and into EA, the line breaks corrupt the image value here. So it's got to be a continuous set of string, which I do know works from a browser. It may work from other editors, but I've always used a browser for it. So there we are. So that's the meta model done. Phase one completed. Back to the PowerPoint. So the observations are that meta models are great. We all use them, whether we have custom built ones or use the EA built ones, we all use them. But how do you maintain it? So it's all very well for Dunstan Thomas to hand over to the GoJ, hey, here's your meta model. And they say, well, fantastic. Now what do we do? We've used it, but we want to go beyond what you've done. So there are several techniques, and GoJ is not the only person that we brought on board. So there are two options. You can either say to GoJ, well, or your client, select somebody or some bodies, and we'll give them a meta model training course. So you can build up the skills. You can transfer the skills. Or, of course, you can get a change request from the client, which is then implemented by the external consultant. Right? So that is just an observation. But generally speaking, GoJ said, yes, thank you. We're now on board. We can now be productive. We can now get something going. And then that will say to the powers that be, look, these models are meaningful. They can help make decisions. Let's move forward from that. So yes, the meta model got them off the ground, got them productive, and they were really happy with that. So sooner rather than later, they contacted us and said, we have a question. And that question is, can EA validate or check the name of an element? Well, the answer is no, because it doesn't. It doesn't even spell check the name. So, but to change the question, can it be done? Not does it happen? Yes, it can. Because what you can do is you can say to EA, will you let me know when an element's created? You let me know when an element's name is changed, and I can check it by using some code. And that is how you can do it. Now, I'm not saying that is the best way or the only way, but what they really wanted was, can a name begin with a specific word, a verb specifically? So, two options. It requires the event model API from EA. So that requires a C# add-in, which would be the Rolls-Royce solution. Other cars are available. It requires an installer. So, yeah. Or you can use a model-based add-in with no installer is required. So we fed that back to GoJ and said, which do you want to do? All right? These are the advantages, these are the disadvantages, and so on. So GoJ said to us, well, it's a proof of concept. Let's go for the simpler option. Let's not worry about installers, because that may or may not cause an issue. Let's go for a model-based add-in approach. So this is how it was done. The list of approved verbs came from GoJ. Well, stating the obvious, I guess. This was then sent to us, who developed the model-based add-in. It was tested locally. It was then user guide for it. It was sent back, and then it was user acceptance testing was being conducted, and it's still ongoing. Actually, it is still ongoing. So this is fairly recent thing. So that's the outline. That's the workflow. So, oops, let's have a look at it. Back to EA. Now, I'll explain why in this demonstration I have got security enabled, but just hold off for now. All will be made clear. Yeah, so I don't need that. So the first thing to notice in this repository is that there is an extra model root. Now, again, I'll explain why it's a model root in a little while. And this has the model add-in and the events which are handled. Also, on the specialized ribbon, there is a drop-down menu here. So a drop-down menu says show verb definition about. So if I click about, up comes a little pop-up dialog which is now displaying information. And as you'll notice, EA appears to hang up. Now, this is something that we observed when testing the model-based add-in, that one big restriction, which I'll mention later in the summary, is that model-based add-ins do not have dialogues like a C# add-in does. You can only use the 3 ways you can produce output. One is via the session output window. You can use an add-in window, or you can use this modal dialog. The output window and the add-in window, we did demonstrate that to GoJ, and they said, when they're going to miss it. Our users will not see it. So something in your face like that is what we want. Now you'll notice eventually it disappeared. Yeah. So these modal dialogues do have this latency, this delay, and you'll see it again in a moment. There's also a manage add-in, which allows you to control if it is visible or not, but that is just management. So let's see it in action, right? So here we have a project structure which I've created already. So I'm just going to go into this pending area. Oh, I've already got some. Let me not cheat, and let me just get rid of those. Right. So I have a diagram here. Right. So if I bring over a capability on here, and I say it's current, I get a message saying the name of this element does not begin with a GoJ approved verb. This name must be changed. Now, at this stage, there are 2 options the add-in could take. A, it could say, nah, I'm going to delete this element. Or you could accept the fact that the name is wrong and then get it changed. Now, both methods were demonstrated, and GoJ elected for let's just alert the user, because if it's deleted, it can be a little bit confusing, a little bit counterproductive. So I'll click OK, and as you can see, non-responsive. If I click at the title bar, it goes away. So this is actually not correct. It's not a right name. So if I press F2 and say, for example, oops, sorry, press F2, I got the wrong keyboard. Say certify me, right? No message comes up. The reason is that certify is one of the approved verbs. Now, you'll know there are several ways you can create an element. So if I took an element here directly into the browser, it still notes, hey, this is wrong. You've got to do something about this. So again, I can just click OK and get rid of it. And I can change that as well. If I change the name of something that's already there, it comes up. So those are that is how it works. Basically, without getting too technical, it is EA is monitoring certain events which are thrown when a name is changed, well, more specifically, when an element properties are changed, and when an element is added to a diagram or added to the browser. Are there any exceptions? Rhetorical question. Well, yes, there are rhetorical questions. If you create a pattern, for example, let's say here, if I add a diagram here, like that, and then I add a pattern to it, like that, and I say OK, unless all of those are correct, which I don't think they are, the event is not triggered when elements are added on a pattern. So it's not a perfect solution, but then there's nothing we can do. If EA doesn't fire the event, we can't intercept the event. So just hold that thought for the moment anyway. Right. So one problem, apart from the limitations perhaps, is that this is visible. It's actually in the repository, which has to be. It has to be in the repository. Otherwise, a model-based add-in cannot function. So if we look at the model-based add-in, it's actually a JavaScript class. So there are code written in it. Now, it's not immediately obvious to the less experienced enterprise architect user how to A, access this, or B, how to modify this. But if you select this and go into develop and go into edit internal code, bingo, you get all the code. Now, there is another reason why I have chosen to show you the code at this time, because all the verbs are encapsulated in a structure known as a lookup map within the code. Now, that's because that if you have a model-based add-in, there are restrictions as to what you can do and what you can't do with it. So I didn't want to, read files and that sort of thing. So this is a simple lookup table with the verbs down here and the meanings here. So for example, if I go onto the specialized menu and I say show verb definition, and I type in issue, we'll type in issue and say, okay, it will look up the definition and provide it. Now that's not really ideal because, you'd like a bit more, I hate to use the word, user-friendly dialogue. So the only way that GoJ will be able to modify their list of verbs, which is very likely, is to go into this and modify it. So for the moment, that is how the GoJ will do it. And they're okay. But what they said was, well, we don't want anybody to go in to do that. So is there a way that you can prevent access to what you're seeing on the screen? And this is why security is enabled. Yeah, now some of you may have already know what I'm about to say, but just in case. You'll notice that there's a blue exclamation mark here, meaning basically read-write access. So if I log in as somebody else, no, that's not me. I've also got access. Let's bear with me for the moment. I'll just have a look just to see who has got, yeah, okay. Let's log in as Sam. All right. Right, so I'll log in as Sam. Yeah, so when I logged in as admin and I logged in as me, I could see the code. When I log in as Sam, the code disappears. It doesn't see the root. This is because it's got a group lock hide model root setting on it. It's a nice little trick. So if you've got sections of a repository you don't want people to see, you can apply a group lock hide model root node. Wouldn't it be fantastic if that was extended to packages? Out there, just in case Sparks are listening. Right. So does it still work? I mean, can Sam still have the advantages of seeing and getting things checked? Absolutely. But Sam is not aware that anything is happening. To Sam, this would be, hey, this is a feature of EA. Isn't that cool? How does it know that? So this is basically what is requested. This is what was implemented. And again, it's all designed to make it as easy as possible, notwithstanding the limitations of Enterprise Architect's model-based add-ins. So any restrictions are more add-in based than anything else, really. So let's go back, excuse me, to the final sessions in the PowerPoint slide. And oops, we've got model illustrations. Let's do that. Sorry, went back to a different place. Right. So the add-in features are that it's invisible, checks elements, checks names. Now, initially it was capabilities only, as you saw in the demonstration. I didn't use any other elements. They are not checked. And that's how it was done. I've done the demonstration. So to summarize, the main issue with a model-based add-in is it doesn't have the full dialogues. So you can't put up a nice fancy dialogue. You can't, especially when you're looking up a name, there could be a dialogue to add a name, delete a name, check for duplicates or whatever. You saw that EA is unresponsive to those modal dialogues. Occasionally, it will just respond. And generally speaking, it just hangs up and then eventually it'll respond. Or if you click outside the dialogue, it will then spring back into life. But that does require some user training, because initially the EA user will say, why is EA crashed? Why is EA hung up? It's not ideal. From a technical perspective, there are inconsistencies in the way that the event is handled in the JavaScript code. If you have C#, you get proper parameters, and those proper parameters can be investigated. For example, if you click on an element, it knows which element type it is or which artifact type it is. In JavaScript, it doesn't. It's just one size fits all. So although the parameters are in theory there, I found they're not available in the JavaScript code because they don't have the right values. So that does limit, and there are one or two oddities. When you're clicking around in EA, you sometimes get a verb check message which you don't expect. Doesn't happen all the time, but that's a restriction on the way that the event model has been handled in JavaScript. But to fair play to Spark Systems, this is a new feature in EA, and we can only assume that it will be improved, enhanced, and get better over time. The changes to the GoJ verb list does require modification to the model-based code. It's not a big deal. It's fairly self-explanatory. The code is fully documented inside it, so it's not, they're not going to change the actual logic. It's just the table, so that is not a massive issue. It would be nice if it was easier to be done. The definition of a verb is very limited. All you can do is say, enter a verb. It would be much better if you could have a drop-down list, select a verb, and then display. But as drop-down lists are part of the dialog, and dialogues aren't in JavaScript add-ins, then we're stuck with that. So those are, I call them issues. Mate, is that too harsh a word? Perhaps not. So possible next steps. I say possible next steps because GoJ are still evaluating their options. They're still creating models and so on. But basically, to address those current issues that you saw on the previous slide, the add-in could be rewritten as a standard C# add-in. Of course, it will need an installer, but yeah. There's also a possibility of elements that have been created and you say, oh, you must change this name, and people don't change it. Legacy things that have been been playing around, sandboxes and so on, where people have been experimenting. So it would be nice if a script was created, just a normal standard browser script or just a normal JavaScript, which just basically iterated the entire repository, looking for capabilities whose names do not start with a GoJ approved verb. So that is, a possibility, and for them, there will be over time tag value changes, and there may even be other stereotypes because this is just getting them started. Once they're started, once they got models, there will come a time when, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do this? And of course, everybody, unless they happen to be dead lucky, needs some kind of assistance with DocGen, all right? So DocGen may be a possibility. So I'm listing this not because GoJ will necessarily take this on board. No, it's the object of this session is to say, this is how you get started. This is what you can do. Now, once you've got started, this is the next steps, or these are the next steps, which you could do yourself or perhaps engage someone to do it for you. So I have finished a little bit ahead of time, which I think is good practice. And the objective of that is to see if there are any questions which I can address while the audience is here. Otherwise, the Slack channel will be available for posting questions and posting answers and various general discussions. So thank you very much for your attendance, wherever you are and whatever time zone you may be in. Most appreciated. And I hope you found the discussion useful and you've picked up some tricks and ways of getting people off the ground. And bear in mind that trick about the shape script. All right. So thanks very much. And I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Phil. So, we have a few questions here. We have posted some in our Slack session also. I
Mm-hmm.
would like to ask a few questions here on the session. So, there's a question from Jorg, and he's asking, is it possible to check the complete model for naming errors?
Yes. If you had a rule about the naming errors, which you had, like if you wanted everything to begin with something, or it had to, you couldn't use spaces, yeah, you could simply, wouldn't use a model-based add-in for that. What I would do is take a script, a JavaScript, and just iterate the model, and for each element, I would check it, could check it against the rule. Uh, if you wanted different rules for different element types, that's not a problem because you could use a SQL query to extract elements of a certain type, iterate that set against rule set A, rule set B. The challenge is not checking the elements, it's how you display the results. Because JavaScripts or VB scripts or whatever script doesn't have a fantastic way of producing nice results. You can't, not easy to open windows and tables and stuff. So you could produce an XML file or some text output. That is a possibility. Or you could use the results in the session output, the system output window. What else could you do? Another one you could do is you could change the element properties. So when an element is displayed on a diagram, it is displayed with a red background indicating it's wrong. So there are all sorts of possibilities you could do to A, check, and B, display the results of that check.
Uh, Thank you for that. And there is also another question from the user named Sanzi. And the question is, how flexible are EA's meta models when it comes to integrating with other tools and systems already in use by the government of Jesse?
Uh, well, the meta model itself is bespoke to enterprise architect. Um, if you wanted to export a model created with the GoJ meta model, then you would have to find a format which is suitable for both. Now, with a different client, this was handled using CSV. So you can, not the inbuilt CSV to EA, because that's a bit restrictive, but if you can find a format that is compatible to both tools, because a lot of tools, requirements analysis tools, other tools, do accept CSV, then it's very possible to create a script which exports the GeoJ model to CSV in a format capable of being read by other tools. The other way to do it, possibly, and I say possibly, is if they're using PCS, Pro Cloud Server, and they got the professional version with tokens and things and licenses, there is an integration with PCS and external tools, which is increasing all the time. So with a bit of luck, that could be done. There is an API as well, which you can write bespoke ones, but that is kind of the top solution. but as a certainly what's worked for other clients I've been involved with is a CSV.
Um, Thank you, Phil. So the rest of the questions, I guess those things need a bit of an explanation, and we have posted them in the Slack channel as well. And
Sure,
once again, thank you very much, Phil Chudley, for that enlightening presentation on getting Government of Jersey started with Enterprise Architect.
you're
We
more than
greatly
welcome.
appreciate, yeah, we greatly appreciate your insights into a real-world scenario and the use of MDGs and model-based add-ins. Our beloved audience, we hope you found the information helpful and are inspired to apply these concepts to your own projects. If you have any remaining questions, please feel free to continue the discussion on our Slack channel, where the speaker and the team will be available to provide further answers. The next session will be on the NATO Architecture Framework by Peter Lieber and Horst Kagel. We look forward to seeing you all there. There are more exciting sessions coming up, so stay tuned.
Okay, thanks very much, and bye bye.